everybody, Karen Roby and Ed Bott here to talk today about tracking prevention in the new Microsoft Edge. So Ed, I think a good place to start here is just bring us up to speed on this feature. Tell us what it's all about.
Sure. People might remember that Microsoft, which introduced the Microsoft Edge browser with Windows 10 back in 2015, is doing a complete reset on their browser strategy. And so the new Microsoft Edge, which is based on the open source Chromium engine, is coming out in January 2020. It'll be on Windows 10, Windows 8.1, Windows 7, Mac OS. And it has a really interesting new signature feature in it called tracking prevention. And what that does is it's designed to keep third parties from tracking your movements as you go from page to page on the World Wide Web.
So it sounds, Ed, really like it's a brand new feature?
Well, yes and no. It is brand new in Microsoft Edge, but it's a curious little bit of Microsoft's history, which I wrote about in an article almost a decade ago. Microsoft in Internet Explorer introduced a feature called tracking protection, and this is tracking prevention. And what that old feature did was, it used a basic text file to block some sites from loading content. This one is considerably more sophisticated, and it's designed to allow some forms of content to come through, to block other forms, and to give you a little control over it.
So with it being, as you said, more sophisticated, Ed, talk a little bit more about how it works, and do you have to do anything special just to turn it on?
Sure. So the first thing is, if you install the new Edge, this feature is enabled by default. And it has a very, very simple group of settings. If you go into the settings for Edge, it's on the privacy tab, and you'll find that there's basically three big boxes you can choose. There's basic and balanced and strict. And each one offers an increasing level of protection from tracking as you go around the web. The default setting, which is on, is balanced. And what that does is it allows content to load. So if you're visiting a website and it has advertising on it, you'll see the ads, but the advertisers won't be able to set cookies unless you've given them permission to do that. And so your ads might be less personalized. You can turn it down to basic, and in the basic setting, all that does is block dangerous sites. It doesn't block any kind of other tracking. Or you can turn it up to strict. And if you have it at strict, the effect is, in my experience, it's the equivalent of having an ad blocker running. Microsoft has done with this, they've implemented this through a series of text files that they can update automatically. And I looked closely at some of these. They've got separate files for advertising, for content, for analytics and fingerprinting, and for social, so things like Twitter and Facebook, and one that I found interesting called crypto mining. And so that would prevent, if you happen to be on a site where somebody has decided to use your computer as a crypto mining resource, this will block that sort of thing by default. The important thing is that you don't have to do any configuration beyond setting up beyond choosing one of those three levels. You can go into any site, just click the padlock next to the site's name in the address bar, and you get a drop-down list where you can turn tracking prevention on or off for that site. You can also look at which trackers have been blocked. You can inspect all of the cookies that have been set for that site and delete them or inspect them. And so it gives you a fair number of controls, but it's a very, very simplified interface. And so I think part of the goal of this feature is to make this so that people get a level of tracking prevention that is robust and meaningful without having to do a lot of twiddling of dials.
Okay, and that's always a good thing. And on the other side of that, if there were, if someone, let's say, didn't want to use it, do they have any alternatives here?
Sure. There's three alternatives. The first one is they can, if you want to use Microsoft Edge, but you don't want to have tracking prevention on, in the settings panel on the privacy tab, there's a switch right above the three boxes, and you just slide that switch over to the left, and that turns tracking prevention off, and you are essentially using the browser with none of those features enabled. Of course, I would imagine that most people at that point would want to have some alternative. So your second alternative is to do what most people are doing today, which is to use some sort of ad blocker extension. There's AdBlock, AdBlock Plus, uBlock Origin, Ghostery. All of those things will work with the new Edge. Some of them are in Microsoft's store for extensions, but if the one that you prefer isn't in Microsoft's store, you can go to the Google Chrome web store and install the extension in Edge, in the new Edge, directly from the Google Chrome store. And then finally, you don't have to use Edge at all. You don't have to install the new Edge. There's other browsers that are available. And if somebody's really concerned about privacy, one that I would suggest they take a look at is a new browser called Brave. This browser has been invented, developed by a group of people who are sort of refugees from the Mozilla project. And they've put together Brave as a privacy-centric browser. So it blocks tracking by default. It allows you to set up payment schemes so that you can pay some of your favorite web pages. If you're feeling guilty about the fact that you're blocking ads, you can actually give them credit for it. It's a very interesting browser. It's also based on the same open source Chromium engine as the new Edge. So I would suggest if somebody's looking for alternatives, that's a good place to start. But it's when the new Edge comes out at the beginning of 2020, I'd say it's worth taking a look at for anyone, just as an alternative.
Certainly. All right, Ed, some really great information there, so we thank you for that. And for more on this new tracking prevention feature, you can find all of that and much more from Ed on ZDNet.